Good day everyone. I am Nellas Ocio, 24 years of age, currently living in Apo Ilao, Alicia Boro. So I am here to discuss the topic about chapter 4, which is the global interstate system. So the state has traditionally been the subject of most interest to scholars of global politics because it is viewed as the institution that creates warfare and sets economic policies for a country. Furthermore, the state is a political unit that has authority over its own affair. In other words, it is a border are recognized by other countries. It is assumed that whoever is in charge of those borders has the right to determine exactly what is going to happen in their country. The Treaty of Westphalia of 1648 was established the notion of nation-state and the idea of state sovereignty. Today, the globalization of politics created an atmosphere where the ideas of the nation-state, state sovereignty, government control, and state policies are challenged from all sides. With globalization, some scholars suggest a decrease in the power of the state and that other actors are actually becoming more powerful. These actors include multinational corporations and global civil society organizations like the Red Cross that has across national boundaries. So in this chapter, we will look at the regional alliances and worldwide organization of state. These manifest the efforts of countries and governments in the world to cooperate and collaborate together. Next is the international and regional economic bond bodies such as the IMF and the World Bank must also be considered as they often push for neoliberal reforms in the world. And the third kind of replacement to the traditional nation-state and the idea of national autonomy comes from the non-state actors. One of these is the private capital groups, including the bank groups of the people, with money that can determine the well-being of people in a particular area, and the multinational corporations and non-governmental organizations such as the Amnesty International are the significant organizations that put into question the strength of national autonomy and the global politics. And last is the emergence of non-state organizations like Al-Qaeda and ISIS and the terrorist organizations which seek power to try to dispose a government and replace the system with their own ideological beliefs. In global governance in the 21st century, there is a series of specific factors behind the emergence of global governance. The first on the list must be the declining power of nation-states. If these states themselves were highly contingent and in flux, it would open the possibility of the emergence of some form of global governance to fill the void. And the second factor is the vast flow of all sorts of things that run into often right through the borders of nation-state. This could involve the flow of digital information of all sorts through the internet. If it's not, it's impossible for a nation-state to stop such flow, and in any case, it is likely that such action would be politically unpopular and bring much negative reaction to the nation-state involved in such an effort. Then, there is a mass migration of people and their entry, often illegally, into various nation-states. If states are unable to control this flow, then there is a need for some sort of global governance to help deal with the problem. The flow of criminal elements as well as their products such as drugs, laundered money, those both unsold and sex trafficking, and etc. is a strong factor in the call for global governance. In these cases and others, there is a need for some sort of degree of order or some sort of effective authority and at least some potential for the improvement of human life. These are but a few things that can be delivered by some form of global governance. And another set of issue that has led to calls for global governance involves horrendous events with nation-state that the state themselves either foment and carry out or unable to control them. Then there are global problems that a single nation-state cannot hope to tackle on their own. One is the global financial crisis and the panic that swept the world periodically, which nations are often unable to deal with on their own. It's indeed that some nations have often been and are being victimized by such crises. Unable to help themselves, such nations are in need of assistance from some type of global governance. Nation-states have long struggled to deal with the problems like this through various interstate systems, but the more received trend is toward the development of more truly global structures and methods of dealing with the various sorts of issues and problems. In the effects of globalization and government, one of the key aspects of state sovereignty is the government. It is a group of people who have ultimately authority to act on behalf of a state. Each state has its own right to self-determination and that other countries should not intervene in the affairs of that state unless there are extraordinary reasons to do so. Other countries must recognize sovereignty or the right to govern one's own territorial boundaries. Each state is autonomous unto itself and responsible within its own system of government to those who are governed. The decisions or the conflicts and the resolution of that conflict are done through the institution of government that is established and codified in that particular state. The policy is developed and implemented in the interest of the people of the state by a specific government. A civil society within a state can also act as a counterweight or as a supplement of government's civil society includes the private economy, educational institution, churches, hospital, fraternal organization, and other non-profit organizations. There have been several challenges to the government and ultimately to the state of autonomy. We can divide this challenge into four, which are the traditional challenges, challenges from national or identity movements, global economics, and global social movements. The first challenges to global and ultimately to state autonomy is the traditional challenges. In external intervention can generally be described as invasion by other countries. These days, we can see external intervention in other forms. In internal political challenges, there are also regional organizations challenging the state autonomy. It is also interfered with the Greek debt crisis. The second challenges to government and to the state autonomy is the challenges from nationality or national identity movements. The next challenges are part of a national identity or movement. It is important to know that a nation has cultural identity that people attach to, while a state is a definite entity due to its specific boundaries. However, different people with different identities can live in different states. Global movements such as Al-Qaeda and ISIS are another example of national or identity movements. Third challenges of government and nation-state is the global economics. This is the major source of challenges come from global economics. Global economy demands the state to conform to the rules of free market capitalism. Government austerity comes from development of organizations that cooperate across countries. Neoliberal economics or the neoliberal capitalism started in 1980s. It focuses on a free trade and dismantling trade barriers. It made sure that governments did not impose restrictive regulation on corporate presence. Free trade was seen as the ideal or the normative belief. Neoliberal economics is seen as a threat in general because a state cannot protect its own economic interests as a sovereign state. In conclusion, economic crisis can be forced government to subscribe to the terms and conditions of the global financial market and of other nations that can help them regain economic stability. And the last challenges of government and the nation state is the global social movement. Most of the time, they are not seen as a threat, but they definitely challenge state sovereignty. Social movements are movements of people that are spontaneous or that emergent through enormous grassroots organization. These social movements are transnational movements, which means that they occur across countries and across borders. Therefore, states have less control over them. The rights of personal autonomy are another example, and this includes the issue on homosexuality, same-sex marriage, and gender equality. There is also an increased role in international organizations like the United Nations and the International Criminal Court in Hague. The relevance of the state amid globalization is that the state is a distinctive political community with its own set of rules and practices, and that is more or less separate from other community. It has a core elements: the people, territory, government, and sovereignty. This means that the state is formally constituted sovereign political structure encompassing people, territory, and its institution. It is important to differentiate the idea of nation from state. Nation refers to the people rather than any kind of formal territorial boundaries or institution. It is a collective identity grounded on a notion or shared history and culture. In other words, these are the state is a political concept, while a nation is a cultural concept. States, through its formalized institution, are more or less reflect nations. This would allow states to have a certain people with their own collective identity. In turn, they should be allowed to form their own political state. This is the principle of national self-determination. And this brings us to the concept of nation-state. In reality, it is difficult to think of any nation as having any shared national identity. On the other side of this argument, its support of the nation-state is that the global process of various kinds are not as powerful as many believe. For example of this is the global business fails in comparison to business within many countries. With this, the rhetoric of the globalization, especially on the exaggeration of it and its effect, was useful to those politicians who were hopeful of such change. In the institution that govern international relations, there are several international organizations that government of countries around the world and individuals participate in. This includes the United Nations and the International Court of Justice, the NAFTA, and NATO. There are also non-governmental organizations promoting social and economic growth. The global politics entails the United Nations or the UN is one of the leading political organizations in the world, where nation-states meet and deliberate. However, it remains as an independent actor in global politics. The term United Nations was coined by former U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1942 in the United Nations of 2011. Its operation began on October 24, 1945. It started with 50 representatives from different countries. Generally, it is functioned in 4 areas: the military issues, economic issues, environmental issues, and human protection. It is made up of close to 200 countries from around the world, and 193 member states to be exact, with the Republic of South Sudan as the latest member in United Nations 2011. The UN, with its headquarters in New York City, was designed to be a place where countries could come to discuss their issues without resorting to violence and war, which had plagued our planet for several years in the past. Maintaining peace and building friendship is the number one goal of the UN, as well as providing a forum where countries could gather to discuss global issues. The General Assembly is the gathering of all of these countries. It is held in an auditorium where speeches are given and representatives from different member states can vote on issues. In maintaining international peace and security, it became the central mission of the UN after the war, and up to this day. The UN is the major force in governing interstate relations. It is seen in Research 2015. According to the UN in 2011, peace and security are maintained by working to prevent conflict, helping parties in conflict and make peace, peacekeeping, and creating the conditions to allow peace to hold and flourish. There are 5 permanent members of UN Security Council, which are the United States, the Britain, Russia, China, and France. In addition to 5 members, 10 additional countries join the permanent members for 2-year terms, making a total of 15 countries. The Security Council tried to be the arbiter in the ceasefires between two sides. They can pass sanctions like block trade with another country as a punishment. They can send troops or observe, and if it comes to worse, or they can use military force. The UN is not all about fight. It has a program called UNICEF for the United Nations Children's Emergency Fund. Its primary goal is to help children around the world. They collect funds to distribute emergency relief from famine and poverty and diseases. It also provides education programs in areas where there are no schools, while UNICEF is the part of the United Nations. In terms of economic issues, the main focus of the UN is the reduction of global inequality. According to the UN, on 2017, sustainable development encompasses economic prosperity, social well-being, and environmental protection. Since the Millennium Development Goals, or the MDGs, did not end poverty of all people, in environmental issues such as pollution and hazardous waste are addressed through United Nations Environment Program, or the UNEP. The UN also has the International Court of Justice, usually referred to the world as court. It is located in the Netherlands in a town called The Hague. And finally, the UN promotes and protects human rights through different organizations and mechanisms. There are also legal instruments that help the organization, like the International Bill of Human Rights, which consists of 3 legal documents, which are the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights, and the International Covenant on Economic and Social and Cultural Rights. The UN is being criticized as being weak and is unable to stop war. Because of this, the next institution that we are going to discuss continues to play a big role in foreign conflicts. This is the NATO. It is a defensive treaty or a military alliance between the United States, Canada, and the 25 European countries. This treaty and international organization is based on the idea of collective security. The countries in the organization basically agreed to combine their militaries and announced to the world that if a country messes with one of its members, the other countries will come to their defense. On non-governmental organizations, or NGO, is another example of international organization that was developed out of war is the Red Cross, or the Red Crescent in Muslim countries. It is considered as non-governmental organization, or NGO. NGOs are not tied to any country. This allows them to operate freely throughout the world. They provide emergency relief such as food, water, and medical supplies for those whose homes or towns have been destroyed by disaster or war. In Global Economic Association, or the WTO, and NAFTA are the next group is the Economic Association, or the WTO. It is made up of 162 countries around the world and was created with the goal of increasing free trade. Countries therefore can buy and sell goods from other countries without placing taxes on imports or tariff. In addition, tariffs are used to protect businesses and companies inside their country. Globalism refers to the network of connections that transcends distances of different countries in the world. In other words, the links among countries and people are better associated with globalism, while the speed in which they become linked with one another is globalization. Today, however, the contemporary world is characterized by being connected through the internet, the modern transportation, and advanced communication technologies. This is to say that, therefore, the society in the world have always been connected. In terms of the economy, Nye on 2002 gave the four distinct dimensions of globalism, which are the economic, military, environmental, and social. In terms of environmental globalism, global warming continues to accelerate. The last dimension is the social and cultural globalism. This involves movements of ideas, information, images, and of people who carries ideas and information with them. For instances, religious ideas have spread throughout the world as a greater scope and speed. Religious teachings are delivered today through the mass media, such as televisions, radio, and the internet. Unlike before, religious leaders had to walk by foot and had to deliver their message in a face-to-face manner. The French social theorist Guy Debord on 1994 emphasized in his idea of media spectacle the sophistication and ubiquity of spectacular visual in television. This made TV news as a form of entertainment. Although content matters in television broadcast, visual spectacle or significance is an important element and perhaps the primary key to catch the attention of the audience. When one mentions online social networking spam and computer viruses, it is the internet that binds them all. The internet is a mark of the contemporary world. According to Ritzer on 2015, the internet has prompted a flat world thesis. Anyone can be involved in it, at least theoretically. Having a computer today in our homes, in our schools, in our workplace, and accessing the internet through our personal cell phones allow us to be connected with the rest of the people around the world. We can gain information by accessing different websites such as Facebook, Wikipedia, through the internet, and other social medias. In the same manner, the information about ourselves that we share is also exposed.